All right, folks, this is gonna be a fun one. I've been meaning to make this video for a long time, and what I'm gonna do today is review all 24 cars that I've owned by age 24 that I am now. I'm turning 25 this year, and I actually have owned 24 different cars during my life so far. And no, when I was 1 year old, I was not owning a car. This was since I turned 16, I believe, my first car through high school, all the way up until now. The beautiful 2017 Jeep Patriot Latitude that I'm driving around these days. So what I've actually done over the years is keep a tracker of all the different cars that I've owned from everywhere I've lived, from the DC area to Seattle to the Bay Area to living in Austin now. And it's comprised of literally everything from motorcycles to cars. I had some Kawasaki sports bikes, super sport bikes, as well as some trucks, the Jeep that I have now, and everything from the 92 Volvo 240 that I first owned, to my 99 Jaguar Xjr, to my BMWs, to the Cobras that I've had. So a lot of fun toys over the years, and I'm excited to go through them with you guys, kind of give you a little quick take on each of them, and bring back some of the content and take a little trip down memory lane with the content that I have from all the different cars that I've had over the years. So we'll take it from the top, go all the way back to high school. I was 16 years old. It's crazy. That was about 8 years ago, almost a freaking decade. Wow. Almost a decade ago, I got my first car, 1992 Volvo 240, little four cylinder, 2.3 liter, inline four, two-wheel drive. It wasn't even manual. Not a super exciting, fun machine, anything like that. I donated it to the Wounded Veterans Association before I went to college, and so it was pretty much a net zero for my very first car. Wasn't really concerned about the buying, selling cars thing at this point, just wanted to have a fun car to really get myself into the mechanical aspects of, understanding how to work on them, doing basic things, oil changes. We actually cut the springs, me and a couple buddies back in high school, cut the springs in the car, lowered it quite a bit, did a lot of upgrades, modifications. Honestly, looking back now, it was pretty ricey, but for a first car, you only know so much, and that was honestly what really got me into the car community, was meeting other people through that, by going to car meets and all that. Definitely was a very fun car, had a lot of fun times in that, good memories. I've made a couple of videos actually on my Zoom AutoWorks car channel. This is the first video that's a car video that I'm making that's actually not on that channel, because I usually try to keep most of the car stuff on that channel, but frankly, this is not really a specific channel to any specific genre. I kind of just make videos about whatever's going on in my life, and cars are a pretty big part of it. So my second car was actually a truck, and that was when I had my first internship after my freshman year summer in Omaha, Nebraska, and naturally living in the Midwest, most of the vehicles out on the road were trucks. And it's crazy to think, back in 2017, the market for used cars was way different than it is now with the inflation and everything. And trucks, especially in the Midwest, were extremely cheap at the time. I bought this super rust bucket Dodge Ram D150. It was in 1989 with the 8-foot bed and the extended cab. So this truck was a long boy. Like, when I got it, it was pretty low to the ground because the leaf springs and the coil springs in the front were kind of sagging. So it almost looked like it was a lowered truck at the time, which I thought was kind of funny. But I put in a lot of work at the time. There was this place that lets you borrow the lift and borrow the tools at the shop for basically an hourly rate, so you could kind of play mechanic, be your own mechanic type of thing. And I was able to do that over the course of the summer, do some minor upgrades. I did third generation Dodge Ram wheels, upgraded the sound system, of course. It was pretty fun. I was able to fit everybody from that summer internship in the truck bed or on my truck. You can see in this photo. Pretty fun time, but ended up selling it at the end of the summer. Bought it for $700, sold it for $1,200. So little $500 profit. Not really the point of what I was trying to do there. Just wanted to have a fun truck to have over the summer while I was living in Omaha, working on the railroad, which was a very good time. So the next car I pretty much spent my entire savings on, which is all the money that I made over the summer working at this internship at Union Pacific as an engineer, was a 99 Jaguar Xjr. It was the X308 with the 4-liter supercharged V8 underneath the hood. That was a very fun car, and probably the fastest thing that I've driven up to that point in my life. I think it was a 5-speed automatic transmission that they actually used in the same generation E55 AMG Mercedes. So if you guys are keen on your on your European, German, British motors, you would know that. You know, that car also spent most part of my, I guess it was my sophomore year of college driving that around, you know, back and forth from the DC area to Charlottesville. I definitely got a couple speeding tickets now that I think about it, driving that car around. I think the 0 to 60 time on that was 5.2 seconds. Had a pretty good sounding V8 motor underneath the hood, especially with it, you know, being a blown motor. And, you know, just had some good times in that car as well. Only major problem I had with it was a water pump failure, which obviously pulled me to the side of the road because I had to get that taken care of and got the car towed. But other than that, it's pretty reliable. It was fairly high mileage, but I went with one of my boys to, you know, get the car picked up in Annapolis, Maryland, and got it from some grandma that had done tons of work on it over the years, and I think was either the original, maybe second owner of the car. So, you know, that was a very fun experience, very good car as well. The next few I won't really spend a ton of time on. I actually didn't really own these for a very long period of time, but they weren't overly fun cars. I just got them for really good deals that I couldn't pass up, and they needed minor work, basically like vacuum seal leaks or, you know, very minor things I was able to do, you know, just by putting it up on jack stands and going underneath the car, working on it myself. So the next one was a 07 Subaru Impreza. You know, this one I had for a couple months living in Charlottesville. I think I chopped the muffler off and it sounded awful. And so I got the exhaust fixed and just sold the car. It's definitely not, you know, as fun as having a WRX. And it was still an automatic, which was not really what I was going for. I wanted to be able to drive something manual and have a little fun that way. The next one I got was a 96 BMW 328 IS. So this was the first of many E36 generation BMWs that I purchased. It was a coupe. I think it was in Boston green. It's a great color for the car. But again, this was also an automatic, had super high mileage. And honestly, this one was not one of the better E36s that I owned. For one, it was automatic, and two, it needed a lot of work when I first bought it, and it was super high mileage. Clearly, it had been sitting out in the sun for quite a while. Overall, not great shape, but started my love for the E36 series and that whole generation of cars that you'll see later on in this video. So the next one here is a 2000 Subaru Impreza Outback. It's a lot of different, it's Impreza and Outback, a lot of things going on there. But there's a very funny story behind this actually. So my summer in Seattle working at Boeing on the 777X airplane program and as an engineer, you know, I flew into Seattle with all my stuff, got to SeaTac Airport, I think it was about like 10 p.m. And I looked at my phone and I had the option of taking an Uber up to Everett because the Everett factory was where I was working at. And it was about an hour, so I think the Uber was maybe 60, 70 bucks. And for me, college kid at the time, that was a lot of money. 60, 70 bucks, like that's a couple tanks of gas. Not these days, but back in the day, you know, it was quite a bit of money. So I looked on Craigslist and I was like, look, if I can get a car for $1,000 right now, I'll just go buy a car instead of having to take this Uber. And so what I did was I found this Subaru Impreza on Craigslist and I messaged the guy. I think it was listed for like 1,500 bucks. I can't remember exactly what the ad said, but wasn't in great shape, but it was running and driving. I think it maybe had a check engine light, something like that. But I was like, hey, if you can meet me somewhere close to the airport in the next 30 minutes, I'll give you $1,000 cash in hand. And the guy was like, okay, cool. And so I met the guy at the outside of this bank. I think it was a Bank of America where I had a Bank of America account at the time. And honestly, one of the sketchier situations that I've been in, because for those of you guys out there that are from the Seattle area, SeaTac is definitely not the best part of town, especially right around the airport. And I literally walked with all my luggage over to this bank and had the guy text me, meet up at this place. I think there's like one street lamp at this little area, but in front of the ATM, there's a bunch of lights and a camera. So I was like, okay, like peace of mind. You know, back in the day, didn't know a lot about safety and that type of thing. So met the guy there at the bank, paid him $1,000 cash, somehow was able to drive that car all the way up to Everett, made it back home, no problems. So the next few here were a lot of fun, and pretty much what I spent the majority of my summer outside of working at Boeing doing was buying and having these cars. So the first one here on this list you'll see is the 1989 Chevrolet Corvette. So this is, as you guys know, the C4 Corvette, which had the L98 motor, or I think it was the L98 motor. So it was prior to when they transitioned to the LS series. As you guys know, the C5 Corvette has the LS, the LS1, which is a great motor, 5.7 liter. It's in a lot of different, engine swaps you see these days, but this one, I just really wanted a Corvette for whatever reason, and I saw one on Craigslist. I think it was listed for about $4,000, and I was like, look, if you'll take $3,200 for this, I'll come pick it up, and that was that. Scariest thing though was that the cluster, basically what you're looking at on the dashboard that tells your RPMs, the speed, and a couple other things like gas, that wasn't working. So everything set to 0 when you're driving down the freeway. So I had to use Waze to tell me how fast I was going. And one of the days I got out of the car and it just wouldn't start. And I was like, oh, this thing's screwed. And it was just like, even when I was driving, sometimes the engine would cut off. And I was like, wow, this is a problem. But I later realized that the car never had much gas in it when I first bought it. And all I needed to do was fill it up with gas. So I did that and the car was fine. Okay, this next one, my 89 Pontiac Trans Am Gta with the T-tops, was probably one of my biggest mistakes selling this car, because to a lot of people, this is one of the more fun cars, probably the coolest looking car that I owned at the time especially. And let me tell you, it was awesome. It looked great. I bought it for only $1,900, give or take. Ended up selling it for like $3,500 because I wanted to just make a dime on it. But I had a lot of work done to it because there's some cooling system issues. I think the main thing was actually the thermostat, which I never bothered to replace. But that would have been a pretty simple fix if I just drained the coolant and changed out the thermostat. But at the time, super fun car. The main reason I sold it was because I was only getting like 8 miles to the gallon driving back and forth from the facility in Everett to downtown Seattle if I was seeing friends or going out or whatever it might be at the time. But took a lot of cool pictures of this car. It was definitely a vibe driving this thing around. Summers in Seattle are great. So it's good for, taking the tops off. And so you could fit the T-tops in the trunk just like you could for all the Corvettes back in the day. And I think even some of the cars nowadays that have T-tops, it's a pretty cool feature that you can just literally unlatch the tops and then they fit in the trunk pretty nicely. And so it's kind of like having a convertible without having to deal with the problems that come with having a soft top. So the next one here is the 2000 Audi Tt, which is actually the first manual transmission car that I owned. Not what I had imagined would be the first manual car for me, but definitely was a fun experience. And the way I actually got the car was I traded it for the Corvette that I had at the time. And I told the guy, well, this isn't like a 1-for-1 kind of even trade, and so you're gonna have to throw some cash on top if I'm gonna do this. So the guy was like, okay, so he threw $500 on top. And so I got the Audi plus $500, traded it for the Corvette. So I thought it was a pretty good deal, especially because I really just wanted a manual transmission at the time. Only thing was that I think the Audi had over 200,000 miles already, but who cares? At the time I was like, this is great. Driving manual, super fun. But funny story with this one is that when I first got the car, I'd only learned how to drive manual from my boy Johnny. So if you're out there watching this video, big shout out to him. He actually taught me how to drive manual. Did it in the Wolf Trap parking lot, a lot of fun. But when I first learned how to drive manual, this was months before I actually went to Seattle, and so I'd only done it the one time, right? So I get in this car, and I'm trying to drive it out of the parking lot, and driving on a flat surface, I was fine. I was able to get into gear. It was a little lurchy, not perfect manual driving. People on the street probably like, what the hell is this guy doing? But the problem was that when I was trying to get out of the parking lot, there's like a little ramp that goes up, and so it's kind of an incline, right? And for whatever reason, there was a light at it, so I had to stop, and I was behind some traffic. And when we had to go and the light turned green, the car would roll back, and I could not get the clutch to engage because I hadn't practiced driving manual enough on like an incline. And so I literally could not get this thing up the hill. And there were these people watching me from a window. I could tell they were laughing, but it was like the biggest embarrassment ever because I just could not get this car going. These people behind me were honking. I was getting super embarrassed, and I literally had to roll the car back down the hill and drive around somewhere that I didn't have to stop on a hill to drive the car and get it around to get out of that parking area. So that was quite a time. And I learned from that point on to practice a lot more with driving manual before I did it on the road. As terrible as that story was with driving manual for that first little experience, I was obviously hooked, and I couldn't get a car that was not manual from that point on for that summer. So after that, I went and got an 86 Porsche 944. So as you guys know, those 944s were one of the few front engine Porsches. It wasn't a 944 turbo, but it was manual transmission. A lot of fun. I bought that, I think, on Bainbridge Island. I went with one of my buddies to go pick that one up, and that was a very fun experience. Drove that around quite a bit. And then I got an 05 Ford Focus ST. If you guys remember from Ford Racing 3, that was, I think, like the cool car to have, at least in the beginning of the game. And this was also 5-speed manual transmission, super cheap, bought it for like 800 bucks, and that was great. Then we get to my 99 BMW M3, which was yet again an E36 platform. And the way I got this car was actually trading it even for the Audi Tt that I had. Mind you, the E36 market back then was not what it is now. You guys can find E36 M3s on the market. Bring a Trailer has them going for like 25, 30K easily with, you know, hundreds of thousands of miles on them as long as they're clean. And let me tell you, this one was very clean. It was almost at 200,000 miles. I think there were some fake BBS rims on them. Had, I think it was static. I believe it was on coilovers. I think it definitely was on coilovers. And pretty much a well-sorted car, right? My Audi TT was certainly not, okay? It was a 200,000 mile car, so similar mileage, but the guy wanted to trade hand over hand just for an even trade, no cash on top, and at the time I let him test drive the Audi, I test drove the BMW. This was unfortunately not a manual E36 M3, but I think maybe the guy just really wanted a manual, and he was like, okay, let's do this. So I traded for his E36 M3, and as I'm driving home, the guy calls me and he's like, hey, like I want my car back, like, you know, now I regret my decision. And I'm like, dude, okay, I let you test drive my car and I test drove your car and we agreed to make this trade happen. So we're just gonna continue on with this, okay? You're not gonna call my phone anymore, keep bugging me about this. And the guy's like, yeah, like, no, like I want my car back, like I'll pay you $1,000 right now to get my car back. And I was like, no, dude, I'm loving it. Like this E36 M3 is the smoothest driving thing that I've had this summer. And I'm not gonna let you just take that away from me because you made a bad decision. So long story short, it ended up being okay, but months later the guy was messaging me on Facebook. He was like, hey, like I still want my car back, and I was like, I don't even have it anymore. So that was quite an interesting situation. But the E36 M3 was probably one of my favorite cars ever. Not only just because it was a fun car, but I had some really good times with that. When my friends came to visit Seattle, I picked them up as a 4-door sedan, so a lot of fun and pretty quick. I would always floor it in the underpass on the I-5 express lanes going north to where I was living at. So, you know, great times. Definitely, you know, was able to drive to a lot of places. Took it to Pike Place. You know, a lot of different areas that were a lot of fun in Seattle. That pretty much capped off my summer there. So you'll see that on my tracker, I wasn't able to sell the E36 M3 from this summer. And when I got back, I actually got a 98 BMW 323 IS, which is another E36, but I only paid like 1,800 bucks for that. So you might be wondering, like, why did I get such a cheap car? Well, I actually wrecked the E36 M3 and I wasn't able to sell it. So that's the reason that that nothing came of that. I'm sure I could have sold it for upwards of 10 grand at the time, easily. I mean, these days that thing would be worth 15, 20 grand. But I was super upset that I wrecked that car. It was raining in Seattle, as it does, and there's this AMG Mercedes thing trying to race. I think we went around a corner and he like pitted me, so I spun out and hit the sidewall of the freeway, one of those barrier things, and it pretty much totaled the car, and so that was a pretty unfortunate situation. Nonetheless, I was able to get this red, Hellrot red E36 bone stock, you know, with less than 100,000 miles when I first got it. And that car I kept for a number of years, and it did me very well. The only thing was that, again, it wasn't a manual transmission, but my buddy Steve is always telling me like I never should have sold that car because it'd be worth one so much now, and we could have easily just done like an LS1 swap with like a T56 Tremec transmission, and it would have been manual that way. But stupid me at the time, I didn't think about that, and I was just like, what's the next car I want to save up for and do this whole thing again. Mind you, also every summer I had an internship, I was not about the whole saving mindset. I was mostly selling my car, or not, rather, I was saving up just to buy a car at the end of the summer that I had in mind, because again, that is how passionate I am about, you know, cars and just having something fun to drive around, and motorsports in general. It's pretty fun and addicting hobby that's really hard to get away from. So the next one here is this 99 BMW M3 Convertible. So yet another E36, but it was a convertible. There's not really any story to this except that I bought the car but didn't drive it down to Charlottesville yet. And so I had parked it in this parking lot, and the title was in the car, but I hadn't registered yet because I didn't have time to go to the DMV. So I was like, okay, the next time I come back to Nova, I'll get it from this parking lot and I'll go get it registered. So the next time I come back, or I think one of my friends texted me that the car was gone, and so somebody had called to get it towed, and I literally didn't have the title, so that was the biggest net loss, or like, it wasn't the biggest net loss, but it was just, there was no way of winning that situation. I wasn't gonna call the police and be like, that's my car, because I literally had not signed the title or taken it to the DMV to get it registered. So big L. Do not recommend parking in a parking lot with leaving the title in the car, so just don't do that. The next one was this 96 Jeep Grand Cherokee, which I was also not super proud of. I had it for a little while, drove it around UVA, and it was nice being able to just drive over everything and not worry about it. It was lifted, but I mean, it was kind of lousy. That's not really my style of Jeep if I wanted to get an SUV, and so I did get it by trading for the BMW, the E36 that I had previously. So at this time, I had the green E36 and the red E36, and I had the silver E36 convertible back home, which I never ended up doing anything with because it got towed, but already had a bunch of E36s at the time. So traded for this Jeep Grand Cherokee, had that for a little while, ended up selling it because it wasn't really my kind of style of car. Up until this point, the newest car that I had was maybe like an 06, 07, super old body styles. None of the cars I ever had Bluetooth. Hardly any of them had AC that worked, and so I thought it was time for a change of pace and to buy something that was a little bit newer and add some of the modern amenities of cars these days. And so what I did was do a little Black Friday shopping actually. So I think it was Black Friday 2017 or 2018 that I ended up buying this 2008 BMW 535. It's you know, obviously the twin turbo N54 motor that is infamous for being able to build massive boost. It is a super fast car, but little did I know that the E60 generation BMW, the 5 Series, is pretty much a money pit if you buy the wrong one, especially if they have transmission issues, which mine did. So this car I ended up spending a few grand on just to get this little piece fixed in the transmission. It was probably like a bushing or something like that from the transmission shift linkage. At the time, I knew all the terminology for E60s, but I forgot it all because it's irrelevant now. But it took me a while to get that car sold and ended up not really taking a loss. But that was a horrible car, and I could never actually floor it because every time I floored it, you get that code that pops up. If you N54 owners out there know, it's like basically the 30FF boost leak, and it happened every single time I floored the car. So pretty garbage, not a great experience, but I thought it was cool doing some Black Friday shopping and had that, you know, executive look for a little while before I sold the car. All right, so I had the E60 and I was like, okay, I like BMWs, but I don't think I like any BMWs that are not E36s. So I went and got myself another E36 M3. This time it was a 5-speed manual transmission. It was black with silver rims. I forget exactly what they were. I think they were knockoff AC Schnitzer wheels. It looked pretty good, but I liked more of the stock look, so I ended up putting my old E36 M3 wheels back on it that I purchased. I have so many sets of M Contours and the DS2 style wheels from the E36 generation. I just bought them like off Craigslist all over the years. But I thought that was the best look for the car. Definitely was able to have some fun with it. I think it had a dyno tune on it and an exhaust, some basic stuff. But being able to have the 5-speed manual transmission again was super fun. Until I realized that this car had the biggest rust problem on the shock tower mounts in the rear of the E36 chassis that I should have known better. So if you guys out there have an E36 or have gotten an E36, I think you're very well aware of the rust issues that these cars get either on the jack points or on the rear shock tower mounts. And so I don't know if I have a picture, but I'll throw it up here if I do, show it to you guys. It was rusted to nothing. And so when I tried to sell this car, it was really hard to sell because I had to be upfront that there indeed was a rust issue on the car. I mean, it's clean title, everything was fine. But I think the previous owner had sold it to me, not telling me that information. So that was not really a great situation for me, but I ended up selling the car just because of the rust issues. And I was back to having just the one E36. That was the Hellrot Red coupe that I had at the time. I had the red E36 for so long that I did some minor upgrades and cosmetic things to make it look pretty much like an E36 M3. Just because at the time, the E36s versus the E36 M3, unlike the M3 versus non-M cars that are the same 3 Series these days, didn't really have much of a different body style. So I think the fender flares, the car's actual width and length were the same, and so the fenders were similar. So basically, if you threw the wheels on from the M3 and added the little, tail strip with, the little M side skirts and everything, it would be looking pretty much like an M3. So I'll show you guys in some of the pictures here. It looked pretty sorted at the time, and I was really proud of the way the car looked, even for it being, something that I bought for $1,800. So that was kind of the last of the cars I had in Charlottesville for that period of time before I went to San Jose, living in the Bay Area for my first internship at IBM, actually. And what I did that summer was, well, before the summer, I had gotten my motorcycle license because I knew I wanted to get a bike to ride around the Bay Area and go cruising and stuff all over the summer. And so I did that. So I got my license for my motorcycle, got my motorcycle endorsement on my license, and then got my first bike. It was a little Kawasaki 250R, super small, 250 cc's motorcycle. Even though it was a sport bike, it did not go very fast, let me tell you. I wish I had videos from this period when I was riding a motorcycle, if I'd gotten like a GoPro or something like that, but I decided not to really invest in that and just ride it for fun, just to work back and forth down the 101 every day. And so basically when I was getting on the freeway trying to get up to speed, I would literally have to give it full throttle to get on the freeway. And frankly, it's hard not to go a little fast when you're on a sports bike, especially a red crotch rocket. And so I was doing, pretty good speeds like throughout San Jose, and there's a couple times I ran to other motorcycles where we'd go cruising, and that was a good time too. But first motorcycle, I definitely enjoyed being able to ride that to work. At the very least, it was good on gas, and I was able to sell it for a bit of a profit at the end of the summer. Honestly, I don't really know why I bought this Audi A4 that I saw at the time. I thought for some reason the B5 A4 was very similar to the B5 S4, which it very much is not the same car. And it wasn't even manual, so I really don't know what I was thinking, but I ended up selling it just because it wasn't interesting. And I couldn't even get the thing registered because it wouldn't pass the smog inspection. So I just spent a ton of money getting this vacuum exhaust issue thing fixed so I could actually register the car in California because the smog test that you have to get done. But did that, got it registered, got the thing sold. A pretty big mistake. Okay, so I've had so many E36s. This was now my first E46 generation BMW, this 01 BMW 330 Ci. So it's the first convertible, well, the second convertible, and also the first one that I actually was able to use because I didn't get it towed. But this one was really fun. It was a 5-speed manual transmission. It was super clean. Recently had the clutch done, and I was able to drive that around, cruising with my friends in and out of the Bay Area, driving down to Santa Cruz. Just like a really fun summer car to have, especially in the Bay Area where the weather's nice. It has 4 seats, you can drive it around, not worry about too much. So definitely had some fun times in that car, and was able to sell it for quite a bit, because little did I know that having a 5-speed convertible in the Bay Area was maybe kind of sought after at the time, especially for the E46s, and this one was pretty sorted, and so I was able to get it sold pretty quickly as well. So that leads me to my next one, which is an 09, which was what generation is that? It was an E90 335i, which got myself into yet another N54 motor. And I was like, okay, this time I'm gonna do it right, and I'm gonna buy something that doesn't need a ton of work, and it's gonna be okay. Well, boy, was I wrong, because this car was probably one of the biggest financial mistakes that I've made. Bought the car from this guy that told me that there were some minor issues, nothing to be too concerned about. And well, there was a lot to be concerned about because this car would overheat on the freeway like none other. So I was stranded literally on the side of the road a bunch of times in the 101. A few of the times with my friends in the cars, that was even more embarrassing because the car was just overheating and I couldn't get anywhere. So probably one of the, again, worst purchases that I've made. And I've slowly realized that the N54 motor and that chassis of E90, E92 BMWs is reliable when you take care of it, but if it hasn't been taken care of and you buy someone else's problem, well, it's going to become an even more complex problem. And so that's what happened. I sold it for quite a bit of a loss on literally the last day I was there in San Jose over the summer. So I just accepted this guy's super lowball offer, got it sold, and moved on from that. So I get back to Charlottesville for my senior year at UVA for my 4th year, and I was like, well, I want to get a motorcycle again. That was pretty fun when I did it over the summer. So I got yet again like a sports bike, another Kawasaki, but it wasn't again a super fast bike or anything like that. It was a little 300cc Kawasaki Ninja 300, and so also had some very fun times riding that around Charlottesville. There were times where I would park it at the bike rack or park it with the mopeds because nobody at college really has a motorcycle. So honestly, I felt very out of place, having my motorcycle gear on or having to ride my motorcycle to class. Maybe on the West Coast or in other places that's a thing, but at UVA, there are not many car people, let alone people that ride motorcycles. And so black sheep out here parking my white Kawasaki Ninja 300 on the bike rack or with the other mopeds outside the comm school. So that was a little bit silly, but I was able to get the bike sold after a while. I realized that I can't even go to the gym in my motorcycle outfit because I'd have to wear it underneath, in which case I'd be sweating profusely afterwards while I had all my gear on riding back home. So got that thing sold, but it was also a pretty good time. And a very reliable bike too, and it's good on gas. Okay, so the next one here was one of my more fun cars, but also the biggest financial mistake that I've made. It was my 2008 BMW 135i, and this I saved up for the entire summer working at IBM in San Jose. Aside from the car stuff, I saved up most of the money to purchase this 08 BMW 135i. Again, I wasn't sick of the N54 yet because I knew the potential the motor had. I just thought I'd gotten unlucky with different cars that had various problems and weren't very well taken care of. So I purchased this from, I think, someone else that lived in the Northern Virginia area before I drove it down to UVA. And for the beginning part of it was a lot of fun, didn't have many problems. Had to get a wheel bearing replaced. The guy also lied to me about that. This is a recurring trend, people lying to me when I'm buying used cars, but such is life and you get over it. But I purchased a bunch of different parts for this car, got it upgraded the way that I like. And it was a ripper for a while. I was pulling pretty hard in the 135i, and it was one of the most fun cars that I had when it worked. Big asterisk on when it worked, because this thing was leaking oil like none other. The valve cover gasket, the oil filter housing gasket, the main seal, the exhaust flanges and all this stuff. Everything was going wrong with this car. And it happened kind of quickly and all at once. I did the downpipes for the exhaust because I found out rather that the turbo seals were leaking, and so that's not a great thing. And I just got sick of it. I mean, I had a lot of fun in this car, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't worth it for me. I couldn't keep pouring money into this thing, especially when I had to go to class. I liked going to the gym. I had ROTC. So I was also, vice president of my business fraternity. I was volunteering. I was working my part-time job, and I was working on my car. You can imagine I was fairly busy, and so I didn't have the time or the effort to put into this thing. So I ended up getting it sold. That was that. Safe to say at the time, I was fairly sick of having BMWs, mostly the newer ones. The E36s I never had any major problems with, and I still really like the chassis, and it's a great car. But the N54s, the E90, E92s, that whole generation, E82 for the 135i, sick of it. So no more BMWs. So I got my first Cobra, actually my first Mustang related car in general, which is a 97 Cobra. It's an SN95 with the 4.6 liter 4 valve motor. It's the modular Cobra, as they call it. Definitely not a Terminator. It wasn't a blown motor. It was naturally aspirated, but this thing was probably the most fun car that I've had to date. I owned it for quite a while. I actually did a cross-country road trip in this car, which I have a video up on my other channel about, but had a ton of fun in this car. I picked it up really far away in Maryland, I think, and and have driven it all over. I've driven that Cobra from east to west coast, literally from Virginia Beach to San Diego, from SoCal all the way up to Seattle, driven it to Madison, Wisconsin, driven it to Texas. That car, I put a lot of miles in that car, and there's quite a few videos on my other channel up about it. It sounded great. I've had a lot of fun in that thing, but it ended up being kind of a money pit too towards the end of it, when I really was just looking for my next project, and I just dropped the transmission to actually do a clutch and flywheel on it, but I found out that it ended up having a main seal leak, which is where the engine meets like the transmission. So that's a pretty major problem when that begins to leak oil, because it's only going to get worse, and so you have to drop the transmission again if you wanted to do that. So for whatever reason, I ended up selling the car, even though I could have just gotten it fixed if I found a better shop. I didn't have a lift at the time to work on it myself, otherwise I would have done that. But I was in the Bay Area during COVID, couldn't really find a shop that was willing to do it for a reasonable price, and I just ended up selling it. But definitely regret that, because that was one of my more fun, if not my most fun car ever. And I'm also thinking about getting another one in the future if the opportunity arises. So after having fast cars for all this time, I think I was racking up some tickets, and I wanted to slow it down a little and get an 09 Volvo. Get another Volvo, because one, I know they're safe, I know they're reliable when they're well kept, and I found a pretty low mileage Volvo S60. I don't know exactly the generation code, because there wasn't anything really interesting about the car. It was just clean, reliable, safe, and it got me from point A to point B without going too fast, or so I thought. So before this, again, like I said, I had a bunch of fast cars, and I was trying to avoid getting more tickets by getting something a little less suspecting and not like a super loud Magnaflow catback exhaust Cobra type of thing, right? So that's what you would think. I drove this Volvo across the coast, so drove from the Bay Area to Virginia. I can't remember exactly what I was doing in Virginia at the time, but I drove from Virginia up to Madison. I was going back to Seattle or the Bay Area, one of those, doing another cross-country road trip, because I kept doing these cross-country drives back and forth at the time. That was when I got caught doing 100 and a 70 in Virginia. And so for those of you out there that know the repercussions of doing that fast of a speed in the state of Virginia, it's not good. So I'm not going to get into depth into that in this video, but if you guys are interested, I can certainly make a video about the implications of what happens when you do that in Virginia. And to keep it brief for this video, don't be doing that in Virginia. Don't be speeding. You can't use a radar in Virginia, so you can't detect if there's cops up ahead that have the radar on, but Waze doesn't always have accurate information, and I was by myself Sunday morning, 7 a.m., no other cars on the road, and I thought I was by myself. I was not, because one of Virginia's finest were sitting on the side of the road there, and I was in for a rough surprise. So that's the main story with that car. The next one that I got was a 99 Svt Cobra, because I really like the Cobras. I thought it was really cool and corny that I named my first Cobra on the license plate Pet Snake. So this was Pet Snake 2.0, and it was another drop top, 99, like I said. So it wasn't supercharged, but this one was super clean, and also really low miles. And I went to this shop in Oakland to get the exhaust done. Basically just did a straight pipe muffler delete. All the cats and the secondary mufflers were still there, so it wasn't obnoxiously loud. My first Cobra was the type of situation where I had to have earplugs in when I was driving around, but this 99 was a great time. Sounded really good. Made a video about that one too, so you guys can check that out if you want. But that was a very fun car. Drove around the Bay Area for the last of kind of my time in the Bay Area for the time being, before I went to Bullock, and I didn't want to have kind of a fast car or have any. I didn't want to have a convertible in the winter in Missouri, understandably. after I sold that Cobra, I ended up having the 2017 Jeep Patriot Latitude. Purchased it from actually the first dealership purchase I ever made, because I just wanted a reliable car. I wanted to have kind of somewhat of a safeguard that, or peace of mind that it was going to be reliable. Really low miles, purchased it, but it's a Jeep Patriot. As you guys know, the Jeep Patriot is the cheapest and bottom of the barrel of when Jeep still made the Patriot. I think the newer one is the Jeep Renegade, is like the updated version of the Patriot, but I still think the Patriot looks better because it reminded me of the Jeep Cherokee back in the day, the old boxy style that I really like. And so that was definitely like a good purchase, because to this date, I've had that car for over 2 years now, and it's been the most reliable for sure of any of the cars I've owned. Knock on wood, but it's been the most reliable. Haven't had any issues with it. I've driven that car across the country multiple times. Put a lot of miles on that thing. Just did basic oil changes. Gas is cheap. The reason why I didn't want to get a Wrangler is because the Patriot was so much better on gas. And it's actually two-wheel drive, which for those of you that are out here about to talk shit about the fact that I have a four-wheel drive Jeep, well, actually, if you're not going off-road every single day or every week, there's no time where I'm actually going to use the all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive system. So the two-wheel drive is better on gas, and I was super happy with, just being able to cruise on the freeway, get better gas mileage, and deal with no problems. So from that point on, after purchasing the Jeep, I kind of took a break from doing the whole car thing and having a fun car, which is a little sad because, cars are really what I'm like passionate about. And every time I see a fun car go by, I point it out, and my friends are always like, stop, you're always talking about cars. And something that you don't really get away from. For you guys out there that are into cars, I feel like it's kind of a lifelong, obsession or passion or whatever you want to call it, motorsports or just working on engines and mechanics and things like that. That's really what I enjoy doing, and I can talk about it all day with my friends that are also into the same thing. And so I thought it was time to get back into something a little bit fun this year. And so I got my 2004 BMW 330i ZHP, which is an E40 6th generation BMW. I bought it in Berkeley, actually, from this guy that worked at the Berkeley BMW dealership. And I drove it from the Bay Area back down to Austin. But having that car it seemed like there was always something to be had, because it wasn't a manual transmission, which I love driving manual. And it wasn't super fast or anything. It was just kind of a very chill thing. I would say if it was a manual transmission, I probably would have never sold it, but I just wasn't having a ton of fun with it, and it was almost just like driving the Jeep around. It was like a good, reliable thing that was automatic, and so just roll the windows down, music up. It was chill. It was a good time, but definitely not the car that I wanted to keep for the long run, so ended up selling that thing and went back to just having the Jeep. And so this is definitely probably one of my longest, if not the longest video I'll ever make, because as you can tell, I could talk all day about my cars or just cars in general, because I do love it, and it's just fun to me, being able to drive fun cars, and that's kind of what life is all about. Life's too short to be driving a boring car. And so with that, I think my plans for the next car I want to get, I'm thinking about a few options. And so I think a lot of this is the consideration that I have, that I might be going on a deployment next year, and so I'll be away for like a year. I don't want to get a car that's really fun this year and have it sit in a garage for an entire year, because the worst thing you can do with a car is not drive it. It's better to actually get after it and drive the shit out of your car than to be just having it sit in a garage, because then it's just sad. So first and foremost is a Terminator Cobra. I think right now it makes a lot of sense to be getting Pet Snake 3.0, or maybe not right now, but when the time is ripe, I'll get an 0304 Cobra. They're constantly going up in value, and I've had a Cobra. I love the body style. The chassis is great. And having that supercharger added on to what's already a really great car that can build massive power on just the stock long block is pretty exciting to me. And so I think I can also make some pretty cool content for you guys if I want to make some car videos in the channel in the future. Either throw them up on my car channel or put them here. I think it'll be pretty cool to see the progression of that car. Along that same line of thinking, I think a C6 Z06, which is, I think, the last naturally aspirated besides the C8 Z06 that's coming up. I'll talk about that in a second. But Blast naturally aspirated big block V8 with a 6-speed manual transmission for a Corvette that GM has made. Maybe not in the future, maybe they'll bring the manual transmission back. Very unlikely, but I really like the C6 body style. I think that having a 7-liter, you know, a 427, that's a big block motor, and that's a pretty legendary thing that you only see in the old school muscle cars. And that's another car that you can build massive boost in the stock long block, super reliable LS7 motor. And it's just, you know, you can do a lot of things with that car to build massive power out of something that doesn't cost like half as much as, you know, these newer cars these days, let alone the C8 Z06, which is a sticker price of over, you know, $109,000 now. I will say, however, that I actually did pre-order the C8 Z06 from Mac Mulkin. I hope that's how you say it. The Mac Mulkin dealership in New Hampshire, actually. It's the #2 Corvette dealership in America. When the C8 Z06 was being announced, I was actually on the verge of putting in a pre-order at a number of different places, and so I ended up pulling the trigger on a pre-order at Outback, which is now, can't remember the exact name of the dealership, but it used to be Outback, the #1 Corvette dealer in America, which means that they sell the most Corvettes. And so if you put in a pre-order, you're most likely to get one from that dealership. I put in the pre-order and I ended up being like number 4,000 on the wait list or something. And there's frankly no way that a dealership is going to get 4,000 allocations of especially a Z06, let alone, you know, like a regular C8. So for the C8 Z06, I decided to go with a different dealership that wasn't the #1, but still had some, you know, they were still taking pre-orders. And so I think it was a $2,000, maybe $5,000 deposit that I have down. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like I don't want something that's really high stakes. And if someone accidentally scratches my car, or if a bird shits on my windshield, I'll be like super mad, right? Because it's like my $100,000 investment that, you know, this bird is shitting on. So that's something that I consider sometimes, that when I have a lower stakes, you know, car that doesn't cost as much, insurance will be cheaper, the whole nine. So the most likely, I think, is something a little bit older, but can build massive power and is still a legendary car / motor that I think would be exciting to, you know, have for quite a while. So the Terminator Cobra, the C6 Z06, and then finally, I think the E36 M3. If I haven't talked about it enough in this video, the E36 chassis, probably my favorite body style of cars ever. And I think it's just, you know, a great look that is pretty timeless and, you know, has held, you know, to the test of time because they're valued at such high prices right now, with as few of the clean examples out there as there are. So, you know, they are getting more expensive. So the more expensive they get, the more I will want to think about getting a Terminator Cobra or a C6 Z06, because I don't think they get as much attention from the car community. Well, those are things to consider, and probably the most likely prospects for the next car that I'll get. Okay, I think I've talked enough for this video, so hopefully that paints a picture of the cars that I've owned in my 24 years of life, and the 24 cars that I've had throughout those years. If you guys have any recommendations for the next car that I should get, or what cars might make like the best videos or content for YouTube, then feel free to drop a like or comment down below, and obviously leave a like because this video is awesome. And I'd be happy to see your guys' recommendations or what cars you think you know, I should get next, or maybe even motorcycles. Probably not motorcycles, this is gonna be a car. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, I appreciate you watching and supporting the channel. And yep, until next time, I will see you all in the next one.